captivating all those she met in life. She was positive, vibrant, and always smiling. Even today, those people who hardly knew her while they were in high school together recounted her with only kind words and sadness at the tragedy of her abduction and murder. Of all of her siblings, Carla was closest to her older sister Cindy. Despite the occasional discord, they shared a deep, unbreakable bond. Aside from sharing a room up until Carla's abduction and murder, they would spend time together with their respective boyfriends as a group at the Walker residence or at the nearby Benbrook Lake. With a 5-year difference in age, Carla and her younger brother Jim got along as most siblings comparable in age did. Jim remembers her fondly, recognising that while Carla at times antagonised him as the bratty little brother, she would also treat him to outings and to the occasional soda. Carla's potential was palpable to her friends and family. She was an above-average student and was known for being very diligent in school activities like the school paper, the tennis club, and also the pep squad. Though not yet decided in a major, Carla hoped to graduate a semester early from high school so that she could complete a semester of basics before enrolling in a university. Carla's boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, was a popular 18-year-old senior who also attended Western Hills High. He was into his sports and was on the baseball team and was quarterback for the varsity football team. Despite having only dated for about a year, it didn't take long for Rodney to be part of the family. Being well-mannered and sweet, Rodney and the Walkers had built a mutual affinity for each other. He had once taken a trip to San Antonio with the family to spend the week with Mr. Walker, who was scheduled to receive open heart surgery. The Walkers would always have a place set for him at the family dinner table, and they would attend his games as though he were their own son. Their level of closeness would make it exceedingly difficult for Rodney to cope with Carla's abduction and subsequent death. As any full-fledged member of a family or lifetime friend would, he waited by the Walker's side for any news and to give support, and finally, with the knowledge of Carla's death, to offer what consolation he could. Carla and Rodney were like the perfect all-American couple, and they seemed to be inseparable. Even if it was just to study, Rodney would visit the Walker residence often. They were both well-liked individually and as a couple, and naturally they loved to socialise and go to parties nearly every weekend. They would especially enjoy spending time with Cindy and her boyfriend as well, playing games, listening to music, or just talking. But probably more than anything still, Carla and Rodney loved to spend time with each other. While some would recall that the couple did occasionally have spats, they fought no more often than any typical high school age couple. Rodney was quickly becoming a fixture in Carla's life, making it clear how iconic their relationship was in the eyes of friends, family and peers. With the Valentine's dance at Western Hills High School approaching, surely Carla and Rodney were thrilled at the prospect of celebrating their mutual devotion. February 15th, 1974 fell on a Friday, the night before the Valentine's dance. For the local youths who lived in the Benbrook Lake area, Fridays held a special significance. Every week, a somewhat secluded area on the Benbrook Lake known as Betty's Hole would become the site of the beer bust, where youths would gather to relax from the week of school, drink beer, party, and just generally engage in teenage hijinks. That Friday, Carla and Rodney happened to be there with a number of other classmates to kick off what they expected to be a memorable weekend. Rodney's enjoyment of the evening was quickly met with annoyance when an older male youth began deliberately flirting with Carla in front of him. The group decided to relocate to Mr. Quick Hamburgers, a popular hangout which was located next to the Taco Bell on Camp Bowie Boulevard. There, hostilities continued, but despite the older boy's persistence, no major altercation came of it before the couple decided to leave for the night. On Saturday, February 16th, 1974, the night of the Valentine's dance, the Walker residence was a bit fuller than usual, with Carla's aunt, uncle and cousin visiting from out of town. Before she could spend some time socialising with them, Carla first had to prepare for the dance. She donned a flowing, light blue sleeveless dress with white lace trim on the bodice. The dress had actually belonged to her older sister Cindy, but since Carla stood a few inches shorter, her mother had to alter it to fit her more petite stature. Now, paired with her matching blue eyeshadow and with her long, curled golden hair set against it, the dress was perfect for the dance. As she was ready to go and just waiting for Rodney to pick her up, she visited with her family downstairs. In the meantime, Rodney was making his own preparations. He'd left work from his stepfather's gas station earlier in the day, but he was already running late. Finally, he showed up to the Walker residence in his mother's car. He wore a sports jacket and tie with a pair of slacks, and in true gentleman style, he had a corsage for Carla. After eating at a local seafood restaurant, they reached the Western Hills High for the Valentine's dance at about 7 p.m, by which time the dance cafeteria was full of students dancing to top 40s hits. Everyone who witnessed Rodney and Carla that night knew them to be having a good time, and they remember Carla laughing and smiling as per her usual self. Everything was right with the occasion, and it wasn't until the dance began to wind down that they decided to leave at around 11:30 p.m. with one of Rodney's teammates and his date. However, leaving the dance didn't spell the end of the night for any of them. It was a Saturday after all, and plenty of the teenagers were hanging out until well into the night, especially after being amped up from the previous celebrations. After dropping the couple back off at the high school an hour later, Carla and Rodney continued their night at the Taco Bell on Camp Bowie Boulevard to have a late night meal with friends. It wouldn't be long before Carla needed to use the restroom, but with the facilities at both Taco Bell and Mr. Quick closed to the public due to vandalism, they had no choice but to relocate. They decided to go just down the road to the north rim of the traffic circle that linked Camp Bowie Boulevard and Benbrook Highway, also known as Highway 377. The couple's destination was the Ridgely Brunswick Bowling Alley. Not a place that Rodney ever cared to go, but it was where the kids would typically go to use the restroom in circumstances like this. By now, It was sometime after 1 AM on Sunday the 17th of February. Rodney had parked in the back parking lot and walked with Carla into the bowling alley so she could use the restroom. The bowling alley, although quiet, was still open with only a few patrons left. The couple had plans to head back to the Walker residence once they reached the car, with Rodney being aware that Carla's extended family were still in town visiting. After they climbed back into the car though, Carla leaned up against the passenger door, and Rodney couldn't resist but slide across the bench seat to get closer to her. For a brief moment, they shared a kiss to end the already magical evening, not realising that innocent romance would quickly plummet into pure chaos. During their kiss, Rodney suddenly felt Carla jerk backwards away from him. The passenger door had been yanked open with no warning, and without thinking, Rodney immediately lunged forward to grab for Carla, only to realise that she was in the arms of a strange man. Rodney shouted in confusion as the man tried to wrest Carla away from him and out of the car. At this point, Rodney remembers that the man looked at him, telling him assuredly, "I'm going to kill you," just before he began to use the butt of a handgun to bludgeon him over the head multiple times. Carla continued screaming as she was torn completely away from the car. Later, he would recall that she was screaming, "Quit hitting him," and "I'll go with you if you just quit hitting him." Rodney, now reeling from the blows, struggled to maintain consciousness as he tried to follow after her through the now empty passenger side. Before he could exit, he was met with the barrel of the gun pointed about 5 or 6 inches from his face and 3 clicks of a pulled trigger. It was at this point that Rodney fully lost consciousness, only to wake up to the stillness and quiet of the early morning. He thought he had been shot in the struggle, his eyes blinded by his own blood. Rodney quickly moved into action once he realised what had happened. The last words Carla said were, "Go get Dad." Doing his best to wipe the blood out of his eyes, he got back into the driver's seat and sped towards the Walker residence less than a mile away, with no headlights on and the passenger door still open. Halfway into the driveway, he ran to the front door, banging loudly and continuously ringing the doorbell. The family had luckily still been awake and visiting with each other. When they opened the door, they found Rodney with his face covered in blood in a complete panic. He began to yell, "They've got her. They're going to hurt her real bad." The family took him to the kitchen, calmed him enough to where he was able to explain what had happened. Immediately upon hearing what had happened, Mr. Walker left for the bowling alley with a pistol. Once there, he pounded on the front door of the building, which had already closed down for the night. He returned home for the night, but not before searching the establishment's immediate surroundings. In the meantime, Mrs. Walker called the Benbrook police as well as an ambulance. She and Cindy accompanied Rodney to the hospital. Once they found Rodney's mother waiting for him at the hospital, they quickly returned home to meet the Benbrook police. Since Ridgely Brunswick Bowling Alley was just across the street within Fort Worth city limits, the abduction was within the jurisdiction of the Fort Worth Police Department. The police were dispatched to the bowling alley at 2 AM, and Cindy would go on to lament that precious time was potentially lost in the confusion over whose jurisdiction the abduction occurred, and what law enforcement should have been contacted.